Hi, I'm Led Gardner, back with another story. This one is one that you've heard before, I'm sure, but I think you'll enjoy hearing it again. It's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived in just north in Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why, no one quite know the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve hating the Whos, starting down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm, lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas, it's practically here. Then he growled with a Grinch, fingering nervously drumming, I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow he knew all the Who girls and boys would wake up bright and early, they'd rush for their toys, and then, oh, the noise, noise. That's one thing he hated, the noise. And you should see the drums on here. Then the Who, young and old, would sit down to the feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast. They would feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beef, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand at the least. Then he got an idea, an awful idea. The Grinch got a whole wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do, the Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat, and he chuckled and chuckled, what a great Grinchy trick. With this coat and hat, I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer, the Grinch looked around, but since reindeer are scarcer, there was none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max. Then he took some red thread and he tied a big horn to the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and old empty sacks on ramshackle sleighs, and he hitched up old Max. Then Grinch said giddy-yap, and the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Whos lay snoozing around. All their windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Who were all dreaming sweet dreams without care. When he came to the first little house on the square, this is stop number 1 for old Grinchy Claus hissed, and he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once, for a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little Who stockings all hung in a row. These stockings, he grinned, are the first things to go. Then he slithered and slunk, with a smile most unpleasant. Around the whole room he took every present. Pop guns and bicycles, roller skates and drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn and plums. And he stuffed them all in his bag. Then the Grinch, very nimbly, stuffed all the bags, one by one, up the chimbley. Then he slunk to the icebox, He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out the icebox as quick as a flash. Why, the Grinch even took their very last Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. And now, grinned the Grinch, I will stuff up the tree. And the Grinch grabbed the tree and he started to shove when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter, who's got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why? But you know that old Grinch was so smart and so slick, he thought up a lie and he thought it up quick. Why, my sweet little tot, the fake Santa Claus lied. There's light on this tree that won't light on one side. So I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then I'll bring it back here. And his fib fooled the child, then he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for other Who's mouses. It was 1/4 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a-snooze, when he packed up his sled. Packed up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the rags, and the tinsel, and trimmings and trappings. 10,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh-pooh to the Who's, he was grinchily humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know what they'll do. Their mouths will be hanging open a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, boo-hoo. That's a noise, grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, this sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry very. He stared down at the Whoville. The Grinch popped open his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, were singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same. And the Grinch with his Grinch feet, ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons, it came without rags, it came without packages, boxes, and bags, and he was puzzled 3 hours till his puzzle was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't thought of before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say, the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. And that is the story, to say the least. So now, I hope that you and your family are going to have the same Merry Christmas that I'm going to have having read these stories to you. Thank you for your time.